George Nobechi's photography lives in the space between memory and myth. His images weave the everyday with the allegorical, balancing tenderness and tension, nostalgia and quiet longing. Born in Tokyo to a Japanese mother and a Canadian father, Nobechi has always existed between cultures, an insider and outsider at the same time. That duality shapes his vision. After leaving a successful career in finance, he chose photography as a way back to life, embarking on years of travel and study that ultimately drew him home to Japan. Influenced by childhood memories and storytelling, Nobechi's work asks us to slow down and sit. This is photography as reflection. We are honored to welcome George Nobechi to the Crit House 3 series. How do you view yourself as a creative? You're a business person, you're a creative, you're a teacher, you're doing all of these things. Like, how do you think of yourself?
I think of myself as someone who's in the midst of it, kind of like figuring it out just like everybody else. Like I don't, obviously I have certain goals and ideas, and then there's life that gets in the way, so to speak. And we try to navigate it the best we can, just like everybody else. I'm walking the same walk as anybody who's watching this show, trying to find that balance and trying to serve needs, respond to needs. Like when I started photography, never did I think that I would, for example, produce workshops or so on. That wasn't what I necessarily thought. I just wanted to do photography, learn photography, and so on. The pandemic hit, and it was during that time when I was hopping on a Zoom, so a little bit like this, early days Zoom, with
Right.
like Matthew Jordan Smith, Byron X. Perello, Greg Corman, Stephen Wilkes, sort of Sam. And we were just, shooting the breeze, like, photographers stuck. And all of a sudden, I was just looking at the screen and thinking, "Wait a second, this we have to do this." And so came up with the idea for this series, Evenings with the Masters. And so every week we would gather around on Zoom, a live Zoom with at first there were like 50 people in the room, and then there were 250, and then 300, and so on. By the end, we ran 2 seasons, 35 episodes. And all the money that we raised went to charity. Each photographer would pick a charity. That finished, and then I've settled here in Nagano, a prefecture in the middle of Japan, and a few photo festivals that were very important, I think, for the development of Japanese photographers to have a place to go and exhibit and so on disappeared. And so I started that 3 years ago, and we're on year 4 coming up in May. Those are all not necessarily thought of as like sort of business opportunities, but like what can we do together, community, like you're doing, Jeff, with your podcasts, is to build the photographic community, to make the campfire larger, to have more opportunities for people to be in it. Because the thing is, we have to stick together, and we have to help create, unity and make this better. And within that, yeah, sometimes it's true. I also lose track of time in terms of my own work and everything, and that's hard. I'm making a conscious effort this year and next to reduce some of my community commitments, workshop commitments, and so on, and focus more on a few things that I have for me, like books. The greatest joy, Jeff, is still going out and photographing. I have to say, when you're out there and situations evolve and things are better. Oh, most of the time it's something unexpected, completely unexpected that happens. And that brings joy.
Well, you are here to talk about 3 of your images, and tell us about how you chose these 3 images. What was the process you went through in deciding on what 3 images you would talk about?
I would say, to steal from the great Arno Raphael Minkinen, he always preached to me, same but different. And that is, he talks about building pathways through your work, as opposed to, having projects, because projects have a finite beginning and an end. But a pathway is a way where you could be yourself all the way through whatever your subject matter it is that you photograph, that it is still you. He taught me this early on when I had first started photography after quitting finance 11 years ago. That stuck with me since then. And so when I thought about presenting three images here, I thought I could talk about that. If you look at the subject matter and if you look at the situations, they're very different. However, w- the photographer behind them, the ideas behind them, the imagination used to create them, very much the same.
Well, let's take a look at your first image, and that is wetted rocks. And there is a second image that relates to this you want to talk about as well. So talk about wetted rocks.
Yes. So this is exactly one of those situations that I was talking about a few minutes ago, where situations evolve that you just don't expect. The wetted rocks, the concept is that there's a male rock and a female rock. They are both deities. In the Shinto religion in Japan, there are 8 million gods. It's like god of the sun, god of the sea, god of rice, and so on. It's it intended as a way of appreciating nature, being thankful for the bounty from the sea or for the harvest of the rice and so on, very much related to that. And so these two rocks are deities. They're bound by what's called a shimenawa. It is this great rope that connects the two. This one is in Ise, right in the middle of Japan, in the central Japan, but on the southern coast. And it's the most famous. And because these rocks are meant to be wedded together, everyone who photographs it in a fine art sense photographs it with an extremely slow shutter speed. And the water is glass-like and it's pristine because it's like, okay, marriage of the gods, this should be calm and beautiful and all of that. And sunrise right behind the torii, like, there's all these classic photographs, but you'd never know what you're going to get. And the day I went, it just happened to be extremely stormy. Waves were hitting the rocks and it's crashing over the pathway. I looked at that situation and thought, oh, there's an idea here, but I couldn't figure it out for about half an hour or so, photographing it various different ways. And that's when I remembered the first image that I wanted to link to this one. There was an image that I made January 22nd of 2018. I won't forget that day because in Tokyo, we had like 8 inches of snow in a day, which never happens in Tokyo. Most of the transportation was shut down. I woke up, I saw the snow was already on the ground and it was continuing all throughout the day. I grabbed 3 cameras, like 8 batteries, put on all my snow gear, and I went out for a walk in Tokyo. And I went and I walked and I walked and I walked and I came back maybe about 2 a.m. I was just talking to Sam Abell about this and saying that I could do a small book of that one day, like one snowy day in Tokyo. I went to Shibuya Crossing, the world famous crossing, with like snow everywhere and people and escalators, outdoor escalators covered with snow and just neon. And so it was incredible. But one of the places I went to was Meiji Shrine. And Meiji Shrine is, sort of a spiritual heart of Tokyo. And I walked through there and I was very happy with many beautiful photographs because there are great camphor trees and all of that in this area. And then out beyond them, you can still see the neon of Harajuku, which is a very famous, fashion area. And so it was just a very surreal place to be. And I stayed there pretty much until they kick you out when they close the gates. But one of the things that I noticed was because Tokyo was getting heavy wet snow, it's coastal, and it's not like powder snow like up in Hokkaido. So it was hanging on the tree branches, but these branches would then, shrug off the snow eventually when it got too heavy and it would drop. And I just thought, oh, what if I stood underneath one of those branches and then let the snow drop around me when I photographed? So I looked off in the distance and I found a great spot like near this bridge where everyone would cross, where people would congregate. And I found a good branch and I went and stood under it. And then when it dropped, I took the picture. I popped the little flash, which I almost never do, but that created the texture where you have the snow that's close, that's wet, that's falling, but yet it's depth of field all the way through, and you see the people and the trees in the back and all the snow. That ended up just by chance being a large, almost full page picture on the Japan Times, which is our biggest English language newspaper. So fast forward now back to Issei. This is now almost 2 years later. I see the waves coming and hitting the rocks, and then there's a great splash of foam that's crashing down. And I just thought, wait a second, this is Meiji Shrine all over again. It took me a little while to figure out that this was a potential opportunity. And so went out to the rocks as far out as I could get. The photograph is made with a 50 millimeter. Similarly, I manually focused on the wetted rocks and positioned myself and just kept watching for waves coming. And I took wave after wave on my head, like getting completely drenched. Um, and so I repeated the photograph several times. But here, a little homage to Sam. I made sure that the Torii was positioned just under that layer of clouds. So it's in that bright space. So it's microcomposed in there. And then it was a matter of the foam, orienting itself the way I wanted it in the final picture. I was actually, as I often did after I started photography, and my father had passed long ago when I was younger. I would take my mom with me on these little trips that I would make to go photograph places because she wanted to see them too. So she's she's out there with me, but she's back at the shrine area because she doesn't want to get wet, of course. And we're talking soaking wet, right? Like taking it over the head. So she was back there and she was saying that she was, overhearing some other visitors to the shrine say, that guy must be crazy. He's like, he's getting himself completely drenched. And I'm out there, I'm like just concentrating on making that photograph. Well, I'm done. I go back to the hotel to dry off after this because this was late in the day. And it's the last thing we visited. I go back and I have a picture somewhere of just with my phone of where I'm drying out everything: socks, jacket, shirts, and shoes, upside down, my hiking shoes upside down, trying to get the water out. Because yes, they're waterproof, but then they got water in them directly
Right in
from
them, yes.
so now they're inside, right? So trying to dry those out. And I took a picture of that and I sent it to Sam of that scene. And then I sent him the picture, and I remember he like immediately responded and said, "That's astonishing." I won't forget that.
Let's go on to number 2, your second image. Tell us about this and the story behind it.
Okay, so about what's coming up on 5 years. 5 years ago, I moved out of Tokyo, and I moved into the mountains in a town called Karuizawa, which is on the eastern side of Nagano Prefecture. But I moved out here to reconnect with nature. Even though I was born in Tokyo, my father being Canadian, my mother from Hokkaido, mountains, forest, and so on. That's what I really missed. As you mentioned, from 11 years old onward, I was in Canada, living in Canada, Edmonton and Vancouver. So the Rockies, we had the Coast Mountains, and I really sort of missed that. And I moved out here in this house in the mountains. I live on the side of a small cedar cone, and I live with foxes and Japanese sorau, which are these antelope-like creatures. When I walk the dog, go up the mountain, and I just see them and no people, and it's just wonderful. Yet I'm 5 minutes from the train station. I could get on the bullet train, go to Tokyo in an hour for a meeting. So it's kind of best of both worlds scenario. Well, I live in this house in this forest, and I put up bird strike stickers to try to avoid, birds striking the window. I had an incident where there was a small flycatcher. It was a fledgling, didn't properly know how to fly. I think it had fallen out of the nest, and I found it on my deck, and it was injured. I talked to animal care authorities and so on, and I tried to figure out, what I could do to try to save it. And I followed everything that they told me, but it unfortunately didn't make it through the night, even though I tried to tend to it. And it was really sort of heartbreaking. And that stuck with me. I made photographs of it. I buried it in my yard and left a little memorial to it. I know that sounds in a way kind of like I had only seen it spent a few hours with it, but I just thought like I had failed it, and it really stuck with me, and it still does to think about. That sad story aside, this is a happier one, I can say. Well, I was in the office when I heard a tremendous thump over by my dining room. And I went and ran over there. It was kind of the late afternoon. And I saw that a wood dove, I think it was a rufous turtle dove, is what we have in Japan, but had struck the window, the sliding glass window. But it was okay. It shook itself off and it flew off. And I was really, really grateful.
Oh,
And,
good.
so I was just relieved from that didn't happen again. And well, I was looking at that window and I thought, oh, wait, there's something left there. What is that? And there's a picture they have there of the late afternoon light when I first saw it, when I first started to notice, and I thought, oh wow, that looks like an imprint of the dove. Is how's that? And I didn't know this, so I looked it up, and yes, doves have that coating, a powder coating on their feathers. And so when they strike, they often leave these ghostly marks of themselves behind. And I just thought, wow. And I looked at all these pictures of them on the internet. I started searching around and everything. And I found, a certain, type. They all look similar. They're all more sort of presentational of what they look like, kind of like the afternoon picture that I took. But that it was starting to get clear. But then I had this idea. I don't know why. I just thought as it was getting darker, it was getting easier and easier to see the powder, as twilight approached. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I wonder what would happen if. And so I set up a tripod on my kitchen counter, looking directly over at that. And I just waited for dark and I flicked on the porch light so that the light is behind it, beyond the glass. And I did long exposures there. And what I saw was just this incredible, almost like a black and white calligraphy like thing emerge in the back of the camera. The details, like just of all, the dust, the powder from the, you could even see the eye and the
The
beak
eye.
mark,
Yeah. Unbelievable.
right, was there. And in Japan, we have a thing called gyotaku, which you may have seen before. It's where people make the fish prints, where they put ink on the fish and then they put paper on it,
No, I've never
right?
seen
And
that.
they,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you have to look at, so for example, if you get a prize fish instead of taxidermy here, because in Japan, that the fish will be eaten,
Yeah.
because it's the
Yeah.
bounty of the sea and so
Yeah.
on. So they take ink and they make an imprint of the fish. And they frame that, and then they show it off like you caught an amazing sea bream or something like that, and it's called gyotaku. And so that is black ink on white. And this looked like an inverted gyotaku, but
Right.
like yeah. But I thought, okay, so here we are as people trying to memorialize and immortalize this fish. Like we are putting the ink on and we're leaving a print so we can keep it and say, I remember this great fish that we caught. And here I was just thinking, well, maybe the dove here wanted to leave its mark, for the world to say, I was here, I existed. Which, in a way, it's proof of existence. I'm not saying it consciously decided to do that, but something in the universe was saying, well, we want to leave our mark. We all want to leave our mark in some way. When we're gone, what remains? And so I thought like this is very much part of that kind of the nature of mono no aware, which is the pathos of things, right? That we exist for this finite time and then we're gone and what's left behind. And it addresses that. So then to me, what was interesting, in making this picture, because I made many long, slow frames, was that I started to see more details, like the little flecks of dust and other things that were on the window,
Mhm.
even like a little spider web, cobweb, like streak going across. And it's all started to look a little bit like something cosmic to me. Like I was looking at space in a way, like little stars and even like nebula, and then like even maybe a comet streaking through. And there was this imprint of the dove. Now, to make it real and to prove to people that this was not, for example, something set up, or also to recognize that this was something that's happening in real life, a little insect came. You can see it. A little tiny little fly of some sort comes in alive on the right side of that picture next to the dove, and it's alive and it's there. And if you look at it, you can tell that it's alive. It's not a print of anything. It's three-dimensional. It's the only three-dimensional thing in the whole space. But that's there to proof of this life, that this is going on. And that's how I arrived at this picture.
I have never seen a photograph like this before. It's so perfect as a statement of art from the turtle dove. If that's what he or she was trying to do, how perfectly choreographed is that to have the wingspan completely out into the eye right there? Just what an artist.
No, exactly. I cannot take credit for that. The dove did that 100%. So it goes back to that sort of allowing your imagination to work, right? So I could have just made the picture there in the afternoon and sort of been done with that. But then to keep at it, I think it just, again, I often say to my, starting out photography students, like I volunteer with high schoolers and with Down syndrome care facility here in Karuizawa and so on, and teach. And I tell them, hey, it's not about what you see sometimes, it's about what you feel. Photograph what you feel. And so the dove made me feel so many things. And I just kept coming back to it, and I just thought, I'm going to do this at nighttime and see what happens. I didn't know that it would turn out like that, but I just thought porch light, tripod, that, and let's see what happens. And then it became
See,
this thing. Yeah.
see, see, that is exactly the kind of thing that I was trying to think about how to ask you. There's something about the way that you photograph that seems to be about the way that you feel. When you're wandering around, are you drawn to places that make you feel something? Is that how you move around the world? Because some people follow light, some people follow the crowd, some people follow the action. Are you just going by how it affects you?
Yes, I am. And sometimes that is light. Rarely is that
Hmm.
a crowd for me. But it sometimes it can be just the sliver of light. I go back to Arno Raphael Minkinen when he talked to me about my work at my first critique. He said, George, you photograph where light lives. And I thought that was a very interesting thing that also has stuck with me, which is that it's not
Yes.
where, yes, so Arno's he's an incredible poetic writer, teacher. He's in your neck of the woods, actually, right?
I
He's
know
a
I've been trying to get him on
yeah.
for a while. Arno,
Ah, yes. Yeah, he's
he's
been
very
busy
busy.
making a film. Yes, he's been
Yes.
making a
Yeah.
film, which I can't wait to see. But he's referring to the fact that I usually don't photograph the source of light, i.e., the sun itself, or well, sometimes I do
Yeah.
photograph the moon, but I think that's also where light lives because the moon is simply reflecting
Right.
light that the
Right.
sun shines on it. So I think that qualifies. But that I find, places where there's a little sliver of light residing in a little reflection or somewhere like that, and so on. And I think that it's certainly sometimes that's what draws me in terms of the feeling. I photograph through a lot of windows in spaces, but there's always the interior space and the exterior space together. And I have to feel something there. I don't just photograph pretty windows. That's not what I do at all. I have to feel. And they're not architectural photographs either. They're not about the design of the windows. And I did at one point, I trained myself to see light and shadow and street photographs and so on, and having the person come into the right spot that I wanted, etc. The sort of decisive moment thing. But I started to move quite like away from that, and I moved towards often the moment before the decisive moment. And I thought, oh, let the mind's eye, let the viewer fill in the rest. You don't have to give them necessarily always the perfect photograph. I mean, a perfect photograph is great. I mean, that's wonderful. And those who are pursuing that, I am not discouraging that at all. But I realized who I was, which was not, I didn't want everything in the perfect place. I wanted us to feel that next thing. I wanted us
Yeah.
to feel like what it's like to be in that space and so on, the loneliness and so on. And that might not have the person in the exact space that you want them in, So to be open to listening to your heart when you're in a situation, as opposed to just relying on eyes, compositional things that things like moments that you're taught to look for. Okay, but what else? What else? And that's what interests me most, I think. And I found that fairly early on, thanks to people like Arno, Sam, Kate Breakey, Arthur, Brett Erickson, people like that who mentored me, who were able to see, sort of identify for me what it is that was the common thread, that pathway in my own photography.
So let's go to your third image. Tell us about this. This is, I think you referred to this as the big one, or I forgot how you referred to it.
Oh, well, it's I guess it's out of these images, it's probably one of the ones that's better known for me. Like it's in a few collections here and there. I think it's quite like as far as print editions as well. It's quite far along in that sense. So it's been an image of mine. I'm not really well known, but of my images, it's probably one of the more well known. And this happened actually, interestingly enough. I was on a trip with Sam Abell, but Sam was not in that room at that time. We were following the path of the haiku poet, the Edo period haiku poet Matsuo Basho. And Basho wrote a few anthologies, but one of them that was most famous is the Oku no Hosomichi, which there's various different translations of it. Narrow Road to the Deep North is the most commonly accepted translation of the title. The problem with Japanese is that the words have multiple meanings. So there's actually a double entendre in there, which is not translatable in English. But anyway, it's to the deep north, and it's to an area of Japan in the north. And that's where we were going. And this was a place called Yamadera. It's the mountain temple, and it's a place that Basho went to. And there's a a stone statue dedicated to Basho. And there's a funny side story that I just have to tell to include in this.
Okay.
There is also a stone statue of Basho's #1 apprentice, Sora, Sora. And I never see a statue of the apprentice, always see Basho, but here they honor both. And you know what? Sam Abell is a dead ringer for Sora. I mean, it was uncanny. It was uncanny. He'll tell you this too. Uncanny. We went and he stood next to the statue and we all made pictures, and all these Japanese people walking by just would burst out laughing because they were exactly the same, which totally makes sense that Sam Abell was once, Basho's apprentice, and this is who he is now as a photographer. It's completely logical. So there's that. Well, okay. So at this mountain temple, great monastery, cliffs, and where the monks meditate up top. Down at the bottom is this little potter studio. And, so I love this potter and visited, I think maybe 2015, 2016, early on, and loved visiting with him. And he does a little ceramics teaching thing, with a wheel. Sam and I, we had this group, and we arranged for a ceramics session with him. And so we all did that. And then everybody went off to go photograph the mountain temple because that's what we're here for. Now, I'd been up to the top before and so on, but also because of the Japanese niceties and etiquette and so on, I stayed behind to speak with a potter for a while to thank him for his time, he and his wife. They served me coffee. It's impolite to just be like, okay, thanks, done, and, see you. So I was spending this time with them. And I hear this rumbling, and outside the window there, the studio, this train goes by. And it's a local train, and I know already that there's only like one an hour. But I see this going by, and I just think, wow, there's a photograph there. And, it's golden hour now. It's November and everything. And I just think, okay, well, this could be interesting. But, it's very reflective and everything. So I made this first picture, just of this scene of just the window of the potter's tools and the discarded scraps. And I quite liked this picture. I thought, it was a telling story of the window and the world outside that, and the late afternoon and the late fall. It was late November, and the potter's life, everything there, the calendar on the side, which is what that is, with like the writing and everything, and then all the scraps and pencils and all of that. And I just thought, wow, okay. So I made that picture, and then I sat and thought, okay, I could now go up and join everybody on the mountain. And, I think somebody had a Sirao sighting and everything, and there was all excitement happening over there. But I just thought, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay here. And I am going to wait for the next train. And I'm just going to sit in this one spot. I didn't have a tripod with me or any of that. So I'm just sitting there waiting, and I'm just looking at the schedule. But unlike the bullet train, the local trains can be really like not quite on time in Japan, especially when you're going through the mountains. So just, waiting, hoping, and I don't know when the sun sets. We're in a valley. This could be difficult. And it's getting darker and darker and darker. The potter goes on and turns on his little lights, like over the desk. And he said, okay, I'm going to clean up. I said, no, don't clean up. Don't clean up. Leave everything, please, exactly as it is. And he said, well, this is a little bit embarrassing. And I said, no, it's okay. It's okay. So I'm on my like third cup of coffee probably at this point. In the Japanese tea ceremony, we receive the tea, and it's all about this. It's like slowing down and become aware and all of that. And even though coffee is the opposite, I like to often think of like, okay, I'm going to take a coffee break sometimes, and that's not because I need a break or want a break or want coffee, although sometimes coffee is great, but it's really just to remind myself to just rebase, to not be chasing after the crowd or the light or like all of that. Like sometimes I need to reset, then let the photographs come to me. So if I go into a garden these days, or if I go to someplace new, I'll go and look around a little bit, and then I'll go sit down somewhere. And then the
Wow.
compositions and so on, or the possibilities start coming to me. So like I remind myself, I have a little folder of like photographs I made while having coffee, and they're all different subject matter, right? But the common thing is that I slowed down and I stayed in one spot. So about an hour goes by, right? Because I said it's an hour between trains. It's dark, as I said. I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, but I think it's going to be too dark. It's going to be too dark to make this picture handheld and everything. And then I hear the rumble, and it's coming, but the first train was coming from the left. It's no good. I needed the train coming from the right to the left. Just directionally, momentum and everything. We want that power gesture going right to left, going from lower to higher, and we needed it. The back of the train going down wouldn't do. It wouldn't do. So I'm waiting again, and I'm just thinking, here it comes, finally comes across this part. And geographically, or topographically speaking, I should say, this area, this narrow valley, that blue bridge there is going across a river. And the sun is setting, if you like stage right, like off to the right of the picture, is
Yep.
setting over there. And there really was no visible light for me, like, coming from the sun anymore. That golden light was gone. But what was happening was that there was some light left that was shining off the surface of the river, right? So there was an actual mirror of light happening, but I was not aware of that until the train car came. So the train car was lit by the reflected light.
Wow.
It was a
Wow.
gift from the photo gods, and it was there.
Yeah.
And I made that photograph. Now, here's the thing, right? No tripod, and I have that window composed, and that whole scene. It's tight. Like I'm not a zoom, like I said, 35 millimeter. I'm in that spot. I'm trying to include everything. His shoes at the bottom, just under the desk. There's a little bit of his slippers there. I think Crocs or something like that there. And the towel, things. I'm trying to include everything, but keeping it tight, filling the entire frame. And here comes the train. I make one click, but like I'm pushing it down, and I'm pushing it down just slightly, right? By the gesture of making that click. And what happened was, versus the first picture that I made where you have the whole frame in and everything, was I moved down just so slightly. So I cut off the top of the window frame. And Sam will never let me live this down. He said, you almost had the perfect photograph, but what does George regret? He pulls it up actually in his classes, and he says, what does George regret is that he cut off the top. Everybody says, oh, he cut off the top. But, the thing is this, I on that front, I humbly accept that I did. And yet I don't, when I look at the photograph now, I don't wish for the top. And I go back and I look at the first photograph that I made, completely finished and framed and all of that kind of thing. And I go back to this one, and Sam also talked about like his photograph of seagulls in Maine, and how one where the wing is cut off in the corner made it real. Well, I
Yes.
would posit that this also makes it real in this situation. And so I don't sit there anymore. And, again, I accept that it's not a perfect photograph, but I mean, that's not what I'm after anyway. Yeah, it sounds strange, but I'm trying to tell a story about life and the unexpected. Like all of them, it's just sort of coming into situations, imagining the possibilities, slowing down, thinking about it, but really letting your feelings, emotion, and imagination come. And then a gift of, serendipity, or the photo gods, or the universe, or whatever you want in each of them. The insect coming in, or being there on a day where the waves were just incredible and splashing in the right way, or how even the clouds above that Torii were just like there for me if I composed it. Like I just had those banding and the layers there.
Yeah.
And then this potter, the studio, and then that train getting that last reflected light of that day. And 5 minutes later, it was probably gone, right? Like
Yeah.
it just came right when it needed to happen and became, I think, a more memorable photograph than had I gotten it in the golden hour light anyway. So those are the things. It's like to not
Yeah.
give up on situations, you know?
Well, what a great story. 3 great stories. More than 3 great stories. Pleasure to hear them all. George, the last question I asked for people on this 3 series is, since we're talking about individual images and the story behind them, is there an image from another photographer, perhaps a contemporary photographer, that you are interested in the story of, and perhaps we can reach out to that
Mm.
person and see if they'd be willing to tell it?
Right. So, as you know, Jeff, we went through many possibilities in my head. It's very difficult
I
to
know it's
choose
hard.
just one. But someone who hasn't yet been on your show, and I want to address her directly. Say, Kate, you should be on Jeff's show.
Oh,
Kate Breakey. The reason why I chose her is because I like to look at the cover of Small Deaths. This is a photograph that Kate has hand colored afterwards. The whole book is that. But it's these little creatures in the desert where she lives in Arizona. She's Australian, but lives in the desert of Arizona. Things like little rabbits and small birds and so on that have unfortunately died. And it happened, she was holding a bird in the palm of her hand one time and just looking at this small creature, this small life that was extinguished, and wanted to memorialize it. And so she made a beautiful portrait of it, which she does, and she printed it. This is Film Days, a darkroom enlarger, and then she hand colors it painstakingly, each feather, everything. I got to spend a couple of years living in Kate's guest house as a base when I was in my early years, 2016 to 18, 2016 and 17, sorry, in photography. I'd left New York. I had gone to Santa Fe to the workshops first as an intern. I met Kate there in a class. She invited me to visit when I would drive down to Arizona. And we ended up striking what is a beautiful friendship. We were both going through a lot at that time, each of us in some pain about life and so on. And we would sit on her porch in the evening watching the sunset behind her beautiful mountain. She also lives on a cinder cone like I do here now. And then watching that last light in the desert and hearing the coyotes yipping in the desert, you know, seeing the javelina come by to have water and so on, and just feeling that beauty of life and of the planet that we live in and the preciousness of life, something that we both had in common. But so we would talk for endless hours about life and the universe and so many things with a glass of wine. Together, we sort of, I'd like to think for that we helped each other and we healed. And so whenever I see her work, I'm reminded of that time with her and the dove as well, you know, so the picture of the dove and that situation. And so in my way, trying to memorialize, although, like I said, in this case, the dove, good, happy ending, but remembering that other bird and that
yeah.
situation. And that's certainly that influence. So that's why I chose Kate Breakey and this beautiful work of hers.
Well, George, thank you so much for the image and for the discussion of it. I saw a show of hers in Santa Fe a couple of years back, and it was one of the best things I have ever seen. So look forward to the possibility of maybe speaking with her at some point. George Nobechi, such an honor to have you on the program. You are such an eloquent speaker on photography. Your imagery is amazing. What you provide to the photographic community through your workshops and through all of the things you do for the photographic world is really amazing. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for joining us on the Crit House.
Thank you. If I've got a couple of things I could add to
Please.
this, I would just say one is that depending on when this airs, the photo festival that we have has an open call at the moment. And I'm not a juror, but Sarah Lean, who's a very famous
Another friend of
one-time
the program.
photo director. Yeah,
Yeah,
photo director
she's
of
brilliant.
National Geographic. And she's the juror. And so you might have a chance to have your work exhibited in Japan. Karuizawa Photo Fest, it's a handful, but if you look that up, there's a submission thing there with all the details. So maybe if you'd like to submit to that. And also that Potter Studio print is going to be in New York APAD, April 22nd to 26th, the photography show at the Armory. There will be a print of that and some of my other work with Momentum Fine Art, which is a gallery based in Miami. That's it from me. And Jeff, I just really want to say thank you for all you do. And your podcast is very inspiring. It's a wonderful example with so many lessons, so many wonderful photographers and speakers about photography. So it's, sort of our turn to say thank you for all you do for the photo community. It's richer with you in it and with you doing what you're doing. So I hope you continue to do it and many more years of wonderful talks and also your incredible photographs and so on. I'd love to see your evolution in that regard too. So we're all walking the same path together. So let's continue to do it. So thanks so much, Jeff.
Do that. George, thank you so much. And thank you all for watching The Crit House.
Thank you, everyone.